Welcome to GFB Express, where we are covering the landscape of college football from coast to coast. Today, we're going to be talking about the new schools that are joining the American Athletic Conference this season. Now, there are 6 new schools that have brought in the American. They, instead of going backfilling, they had 11 schools. They were at 12. UConn left, went independent in football, put all their other sports in the Big East, and so they were at 11. They had a waiver from the NCAA to be able to still hold a conference championship game. That ended up not mattering because they changed the rules of what you needed to be able to host a game. But they decided to expand bigger and go to 14 teams and try to insulate themselves a little bit from maybe the Mountain West pulling some teams and encroaching on their footprint and really kind of getting themselves some mass so that maybe they could handle a couple of defections easier should more realignment take place. Now, originally, and kind of from the jump of the American, it's always been seen as Conference USA 2.0. And that's really is because from their first season after the Big East breakup in 2013, they had Louisville and Rutgers there who both left and went to the Big Ten and the ACC respectively. But even then, Louisville came to the Big East from Conference USA, and every team except for Navy that has ever played football in the American, and Rutgers, at some point was in Conference USA. And if you look at the current schools now, obviously Houston, Cincinnati, and Memphis have all left, or Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF have all left. Memphis, SMU, South Florida, Temple, ECU, Tulane, Tulsa, all came from Conference USA, and now they add 6 schools from Conference USA this year. Charlotte, whose stadium is behind me, Florida Atlantic, North Texas, Rice, UAB, and UTSA. Now, if we look at the schools of who is most likely to come in and make a difference from day one, it's going to be UTSA. Jeff Traylor won back-to-back Conference USA championships. They're returning a quarterback. They've got a ton of talent. Traylor is rolling in recruiting in the state of Texas. He's a longtime high school coach, very beloved down there, and he is making waves, and they're really poised to kind of be maybe the next UCF, where it's a startup school with a young program in a big metro area that loves football, and they get some good coaching in there and can really capitalize on the talent around them. FAU, you might remember that Tom Herman is the coach now at FAU after they messed around with Willie Taggart for a bit. They let go of him, brought in Tom Herman. Former Texas quarterback Casey Thompson is now also there, going to be playing at FAU this year. And that's really the two things. I mean, UAB, they had the comeback story of coming back from the dead after they were canceled and Bill Clark taking them to a conference championship. That's all great. But Bill Clark, depending on who you talk to, may have stepped away because the athletic department is a dumpster fire. And they hired Trent Dilfer, who was a high school coach at a low-level school in Nashville, to come in and be their head coach. And it was just a bungling, if you will, of a coaching search. So I don't expect a lot out of the Blazers. Rice is Rice. They went to a bowl last year because they went 5-7 and they have high academics. They brought in their head coach, Mike Bloomgren, has been there for a while now, and he came over from Stanford, which is a good fit for them. And they are just always going to continue to struggle and be Rice. North Texas had that little cup of coffee with Seth Luttrell in 2017, 2018, where they won 9 games apiece, and they've really struggled since then. And they're trying to rebuild as well. They had a little bit of a run last year. They got some, good quarterback play, and they could maybe potentially be something in the future. And Charlotte has just struggled. They've only gone to 1 bowl game. I used to be a Charlotte season ticket holder, actually. They fired Will Healy, who really struggled. He started off the gate, won 7 games in 2019, took him to their first bowl game. The COVID season wrecked them as they had 6 or 7 games that were scheduled or canceled or postponed because of positive COVID tests, including one where the week afterwards the lab said, oops, sorry, we swapped your results with another team. You guys were fine. And in 21 and 2022 were just bad, especially on defense. Biff Poggi comes in. He was, the assistant head coach up at Michigan. He has a history as a hedge fund manager. Really, Charlotte being a big banking city, they're trying to bring him in to get some financial investment in a lot of ways that Coastal Carolina did with I can't remember his name off the top of my head, Joe something, who was the president of TD Ameritrade, who was the first coach at Coastal Carolina, and trying to do that with Biff Poggi. getting that in there. He was the head coach at St. Francis in the DC area for a long time, one of the top 10 high school programs in the country. And now he's got 26 players on his roster that played for him when they were high school or played at St. Francis, including a lot of former a lot of former 4-star prospects out of high school. So the big news with them is yesterday at their media day, he was only asked 3 questions at his time at the podium. And he said, he ended it by saying 3 questions. That's it. I mean, maybe I get that you guys think that we're going to be last in the league, but if that's all you have, then, we'll take note of that. And so he's trying to really instill this us against the world mentality. It's probably still a couple years away, but going into this league, they've grabbed 6 teams that really fit their brand of, we want schools, almost commuter schools, but in big metro areas where there's a lot of football talent. You look at, maybe they're not the strongest. The way I've always described the American is that they don't have the strongest programs, but they have really good teams, where it's, every year the champion of the American who has the stars aligned for them that year can go toe to toe with anybody, but they may not be the same team year over year over year, where it's that continual strength because they have a coach picked off, or, you lose a bunch of guys to the draft or graduation. And there's a lot of rebuilding rather than reloading coming out of that conference. That said, these 6 new teams, it is definitely a much weaker league than we've seen in the past, especially with the 3 best teams or best programs leaving. I mean, Houston and Memphis, you can kind of trade. One or the other, wouldn't really matter which one left. So that's about 6 is there, but the league definitely has taken a step back to where there's a big debate now of, with the Sun Belt coming up in quality and popularity, even though the American is making more money now, the Sun Belt seems to be catching them in terms of on-field play and perception. And then if the Mountain West struggles with geography and kind of being in those late slots where they don't get as much attention and they have a hard time scheduling P5 teams, it's, can they continue to build, and kind of, can this new investment come back? All 6 of these teams were making about $300K before a year from their media deal in the Mountain West, or in the Conference USA, sorry. And now that they've moved over to the American, all the other American schools are making about $7 million a year on their deal. The 6 incoming schools for the remainder of this contract, which I believe runs through 2030 or 2031, they signed a really, really long deal just because they wanted to say it was a $1 billion deal. So they signed a really long deal for $7 million a year per team. These new schools are coming in at a very discounted rate in order to take that 11 team, slice of the pie and break that up and keep it what it was. So they're coming in even below a half share, I think, because there was some valuation that dropped. And I think UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati were named specifically as schools that if they left the conference, then the deal would need to be renegotiated. So Mike Oresco, when he brought in these 6 teams, he had to go back to the media partners, figure out a solution. And what they landed on was a very discounted rate for the new incoming schools, which was still multiples, like 5x at least, more than what they were getting before in Conference USA, while keeping the existing members whole. So who comes to the top of this league? It's probably going to be Memphis. As SMU, it seems like they're reinvesting into football. Rhett Lashley is a good coach there. If they can finally play some defense, then they can run this league as well. But it's their UAB and UTSA seem to be, or FAU, sorry, and UTSA of the new schools seem to be the ones that have the chance to rise to the top. And UAB, man, with that hiring of Trent Dilfer, you just really feel like they set themselves back 5 or 6 years, because that is going to be a mess. If you like the content, please like, subscribe, share. Fuel the algorithm, and we'll be back tomorrow as we continue our short series of schools that have changed conferences this year in real